Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Insight. This week, we are thrilled to welcome Markus Stenz as our guest conductor. Thank you for being with us this week. Thank you for flying all this way to be with the orchestra.
It's a pleasure.
And we're very excited to have you leading a very core 19th century Germanic program. So, before we get into the program, tell us a little bit about yourself, your career, and what you're doing these days.
Yeah. Look, I've been conducting for a number of years. I've been music director of an opera house and symphony orchestras as well. It was the Cologne Opera House, the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, and also the Dutch Radio Symphony Orchestra. Before that, I was music director of the London Sinfonietta. So, from the experimental scores, I ventured into the symphonic world in Melbourne, then broadened the horizon with all the operas during 11 years at the Cologne Opera. And with the Dutch Radio, we also did adventurous stuff, interesting programs, and concert performances at the Concertgebouw. So I don't know, I feel pretty much complete now. I feel, I do travel with pieces that I've lived with for a number of years. And it's always great to revisit them in order to make them spring to life.
Yeah, and these two pieces we have this week are ones that many people have heard many times, but very interested to see the life that you bring to both of them. We begin with Beethoven's Leonore No. 3. Now, the impetus for these three different overtures was his opera Fidelio, really the only surviving complete opera of Beethoven's we have. What is the history behind calling these overtures Leonore overtures rather than Fidelio?
Leonore, of course, is the main character of the piece. And therefore, Beethoven's attempts to produce the right overture for the opera, Leonore 1, 2, 3. But the thing is, these Leonore overtures, they are so theatrical within themselves. They are so much standalone pieces. Yep. That although, we can describe how they are related to the opera, I love performing number 2 and number 3 in particular of the Leonore overtures because of the sheer drive and the sheer willpower and the enthusiasm that you hear in those pieces.
You could point to so many points in Beethoven's life and say this was a really interesting part of his life. Yeah. There are many interesting things going on, both personally, politically, nationally. This is one of those interesting times.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what you harvest from looking into Beethoven's life is the amount of drive. He was kind of possessed in expressing the sentiments of his time. So you'll find revolution, or you'll find nature, or you find political ambition, and you always find it unfiltered and more extreme than any other composer of his time. And what you can take from this is, in your own performance, the amount of conviction that you need to play the right message.
Mm-hmm. And this was in the mid-1800s, is that about when this is being written? So, he's in his mid-30s at this point.
Yeah.
And he makes it all the way to 1827. And in that time, he did leave us this opera that is still part of the standard repertoire today.
Yeah.
Several overtures. Of course, 32 brilliant piano sonatas, string quartets, and 9 symphonies, which is a fraction of what some of his predecessors wrote. Mozart writing 41 of them, Haydn 104. But these 9 really, in their own right, changed everything.
Oh, they pushed the limits.
Everything that came after that, whether it be the very end of Schubert's compositional period, Schumann, and our other composer on this program, Brahms, this was a significant shadow that they were under.
They've certainly, felt the great Beethoven breathing down their neck.
Yeah. When you think about this first Brahms symphony, which he was about 50 years old when he wrote, when he finished it anyway. The perception, the actual influence, all of that shadow, that arm of Beethoven. What do you hear? Whether it's homage, response, consideration. What do you hear in this first?
I hear somebody who clearly has a deep admiration for the achievements not only of Beethoven, but also of Haydn and Mozart and the classical era. Mm-hmm. Brahms, of course, is writing as a contemporary of Wagner. Yeah. And, whereas Wagner goes megalomaniac in the proportions of his operas and the dimensions and the playing time and the singing and the orchestration and the long lines and this kind of thing, Brahms goes the opposite way. He reinvents, if you want, the idea of phrasing, of shaping, details in music so that they become a narrative that's very, very much gestural. And it's so harmonious in many ways and so perfect in its layout and its dimensions. It really is always a joy to visit this symphony.
It's interesting how both Brahms and Wagner were drawing the inspiration for their fundamentals and their aesthetics from their concept of what the continuation of Beethoven's legacy was intended to be. Of course, Wagner was very confident in his own assertions about that, but Brahms really is drawing on the more elegant and subtle blocks that Beethoven so strongly codified.
You see, Brahms doesn't need the extended orchestra. You get the double woodwind, and in many cases you can play Brahms on natural horns. You don't need by that time, of course, the valve horns had been invented, but you don't need them to play Brahms' symphonies. Yeah. He was very much so inspired by that classical period.
And public sentiment at the time was very divided. It is interesting how people weren't really sure how that was going to shake out.
Well, I mean, isn't it just blissful to be part of contemporary music? And, at that time, of course, people didn't know that there was going to be, a life after Wagner or a life after Brahms or, a life after Mahler and where music would go. It was the outer edge of space, if you want. And that's sometimes a very refreshing thought. It's the idea that Brahms and Wagner both were revered to as the cutting edge of music. Of course, with a profound knowledge of what happened before. These people were alive. Brahms was writing, Wagner was writing, and everybody was curious about the next album, if you want, and the next outing. And that's the kind of spirit that I always love to generate in the performances nowadays. Those pieces, Beethoven and Brahms, have to spring to life, and that means that there is no way we will try and recreate a great recording or something that has been done before. It will be our performance. It will be personal. It will be tailored to the people who are here. The idea of performing classical music for me is unthinkable as something that is preset. We will rehearse, don't worry. But what we will do is we'll try and galvanize the raw energy of Beethoven or the sheer beauty of those Brahms phrases.
One of the amazing things of this first symphony of Brahms is the very beginning of it starts with such a demonstrative gesture, and there is so much to draw for the entirety of that symphony from that opening, which is so stately isn't even the word, but I mean it is strong and
Well, it's grand
Yeah.
and it's passionate, but it's not yet full speed. And then a whole box gets opened of idea after idea after idea. And then when you look into the next layer, you find, oh, this idea stems from there. And this is how it's, you can decipher the building blocks, that nonetheless you can listen to it and just be overwhelmed by that flow of ideas.
Yeah. Well, we are very excited to hear you bring all of this to life this week. So please join us for this. Do not miss this very fresh and exciting take on Brahms and Beethoven. Join us Friday night or Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. in Jacoby Symphony Hall. Maestro, thank you so much again.
It is my
Wonderful to
pleasure.
have you here.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.